Okay, so before we get into the review, I need to clarify a big mess up on my part. As with the theme of this Ani-vember, I'm looking at a show from each year for the past 30. This one should have been 2022. However, in doing a little more research, I came to find that this actually premiered in 2021 on streaming services. It made its broadcast debut in 2022, which is what's counted on my anime list and when I remember first watching it, so that's where I got my line of thinking. So I technically wasn't wrong, but I wasn't right either. So in the spirit of making it right, I'm going to do a makeup review later in December, and just one I'm kind of glad to look over. But for now, let's get into this original script. Enjoy. Of the shows I decided to do for this month, the Heike story may be the one I hesitated the most to cover, over the mere fact that I'm not sure what notes I could say about it other than this. It's the most genuine anime I've ever seen. That's not to say it doesn't have issues, nor anything significant that shouldn't be bothered to be looked at, because it's quite the opposite. But the Heike story is really one of those pieces of media that should be experienced firsthand, rather than recounted in some sum-up. But I already wrote the script, edited the video, and watched the entire show again, so I might as well. But let me just say, I do urge you to watch it before finishing the rest of this video. Then you can come back to tell my fragile ego how right I was. Loosely based on the circa 14th century historical epic, the Heike story follows Biwa, a young recently orphaned girl who can see the future. She meets with the head of the clan that killed her father, and predicts of their eventual ruin during the ongoing crusading power struggle developing in the Ginpei War. Thinking the girl to be some kind of oracle, the Lord invites her to stay with him and his family so that she can live a relatively normal life, albeit with the additional agenda of preventing the clan's fall. While she accepts to live with them, she's hesitant on helping the people who killed her dad. It's a thorny path ahead for the clan, and with Biwa monitoring the ups and downs of its people, its lord, and the tides of war, it's anything but a story written in stone. Now, the tale of the Heike is not one I'm too familiar with, so please pardon my ignorance on the direct details of the original work. But if it's anything like the rich emotional rollercoaster of this adaptation, then I need to start reading. Just basing this on my limited knowledge of the source, the Heike story is a period piece that addresses the strengths of period pieces in a masterful way, those being keeping an engaging atmosphere in the semi-grounded world and, more importantly, translating or conveying a newer perspective of the character's emotional growth. Biwa serving as this narrative point fundamentally works as a young chronicler of the events, thus has greater emotional ties to the story she was a part of. By having her see the future, there's an added tragedy of what's to come, and the way she acts is understandable because of the circumstances she finds herself stuck in. Biwa herself is one of the more fun and emotionally investing characters of this month, as you see her come out of her shell pretty easily but is still susceptible to a brittle environment that can come crashing down at any moment. You do feel bad for her, but as is the nature of her own stances and the future to be told, there's a dreadful calamity to unfold that makes Biwa's frailty all the more memorable. The animation and style are also great. It's precise yet simple, and homes in on a cultivated look akin to the older artworks of feudal Japan. This helps mellow out the atmosphere, which, surprisingly, makes the stakes of what's to come more pronounced and booming. The sharp scenes of death and tragedy become more raw and unfiltered, even when death itself isn't shown. Laying this groundwork out is a tale of the fostering of a young girl and her unwanted abilities. It's a twisted perspective that drives in that while the story is old, it can be added onto in a genuine and fresh way. You don't necessarily remember the names involved with the story's progress, but you do remember the turmoils and peaks they've gone through. What results is a very smart, very emotive tale of the ages told through another lens that knows it needs to have a firm idea of atmospheric intelligence. And it nails it. Sure, there are problems with it, like some of the character designs aren't that notable, but like I said, you don't necessarily stay engaged for the minor things, but rather how the overall experience simmers in a quality balance of emotions and storytelling centering on this impressionable girl. The Heike story is an anime that does one thing so perfectly, it aligns its other elements in a harmonic and clever equilibrium. The feeling of a foregone future in the head of a little girl who can lose everything again is nothing short of a brilliant idea, and it's executed in impactful and surgically emotional cuts. Again, I don't know too much about the original story, so I don't know how faithful or not this is to it, but I can't help but think that this is an excellent adaptation regardless because it still manages to be its own thing through the eyes of Biwa. It foretells a story of many losses and few gains, but in watching it, there's much more to take from it than not.